power on.
Now entering the gaming grid. The latest gaming news, reviews, and retro culture, as only the man of tomorrow can deliver. And here's your host, Brian Sovereign.
The man of tomorrow is here, the golden stallion of the tech world, ready to get it on for another episode of the Gaming Grid. And you knew this one was coming because I said there's going to be so many announcements coming out throughout June. We did one at the beginning of June. We've got another one because there was so much that was going to happen. Of course, you had E3, a lot of announcements to get into for that. There was also Google Stadia. Google had their kind of event where they revealed quite a bit about that, and we've gotten a lot more information over time throughout June about that. We're going to get into that, and then in my opinion, the crown jewel of news for June 2019 is we finally got the big reveal, or a big part of the reveal, of the C64, the full-size the C64. Not the mini one, even though we've already talked about that. We reviewed it on the Gaming Grid. I love that fucking machine, and it's still my top retro console, though, you know, we got a couple of very interesting contenders coming out this year. Of course, the Capcom console, and, well, we're going to get into it later, but one of the things that got announced at E3, amazingly, was Konami is coming out with a TurboGrafx 16 Mini, which has some interesting features that I think are worthwhile to talk about, and I'm excited for it. But yeah, so much to get into for this second episode of June 2019 of the Gaming Grid. And, well, why waste time? Let's get into it. Woo! And opening this baby right up, I finally got now, you can't get these anymore. In fact, there's a part of it that's got me a little bit pissed off. There's a link in the show notes for this. Of course, earlier in the month, I did a small review of Sigil, which is shall we say, the fifth episode, as it were, the continuation of course, the classic 1993 game Doom by John Romero, John Carmack, and all of them. I didn't get the Beast box, but I did pre-order the standard box, and I ended up that finally came in June. And, well, even though it's not the Beast box, the box is still a beast. This is a massive, I mean, you know, now I understand, okay, I was born in 1981, so I've been around. I remember what, you know, going into Babbage's or Electronics Boutique or whatever and seeing the PC games. You know, you had like the PS2 games or even the PlayStation 1 games, which of course came in like CD cases. You know, I mean, those are all kind of small cases. Then you'd look over at the PC games and there's these giant fucking boxes, right? You know, it's crazy. Well, they release limited edition boxes, John Romero did, through Limited Run Games, which, by the way, Limited Run Games had, in my opinion, the top announcement. Okay, and we're going to talk about other stuff that came out throughout E3, including the Intellivision announcement, so on. Okay, or reveals. But in my opinion, they had the top announcement at E3, which is that they are going to release, speaking of physical PC games, they are going to release physical editions of Star Wars games, classic LucasArts games. In fact, I'm sure it'll probably go beyond Star Wars. I'm not going to talk about that here. I'm going to save that for an episode of TIE Fighter Renegades where, my buddy and I, Robin Freebeard, my brother, where we can talk all that up. We'll save that for the actual Star Wars show on Zomia 1. But this is the Gaming Grid, but just mentioning it, I'm aware of it. I'm excited for it. I actually had somebody tweet me about it, and oh man, I can't wait for that. But regardless, anyway, Sigil, so this came out as a physical release by Limited Run Games, and you can, of course, it ended up, you can get it for, and we already knew back when it was first announced back in 2018 that you'd be able to get the game for free. Now, funny thing was that you could get it for free, and that would have a soundtrack done by, now I can't remember his name, John something. Anyway, the free version with that soundtrack, with the MIDI soundtrack, is fantastic. That MIDI soundtrack is awesome. But if you wanted to pay, in fact, of course, quite humorously, if you want to pay 666 in euros, for, to and the links in the show notes if you want to go to the site, to John Romero Games, you could get the version that includes the WAD for having the Buckethead soundtrack, which the Buckethead soundtrack for Sigil is tremendous. If you don't know Buckethead, well, it's time for you to start listening to the Hard and Fast podcast on Zomia 1, because that's where we talk metal all the time. But anyway, that was so fucking badass. But you could end up getting it that way. I did have to, to make all this work, I know there's a way to just do it through GZ Doom. I ended up installing a ZDL to allow for the multiple WADs to work at the same time, to where I could listen to the, even though the game, like I said, it's great without Buckethead soundtrack. It's great with John's, stock soundtrack that it came with. Okay. But anyway, so yeah, by the way, I just kind of let the cat out of the bag. I love Sigil. I think it is a tremendous entry into the Doom WAD scene and into the Doom universe itself. I've had a great time with it. I still play it over and over again. I think the deathmatch stuff, I mean, there's so much to learn. So here's the thing, is that the box set that I got, again, I didn't get the Beast box, but I got the standard box. It comes with a diskette, a 3.5-inch diskette, floppy, which is actually just a USB drive. And that has on it, it's a 16 gig USB drive, and it has all of the, it has the WADs for Sigil, the Buckethead WAD, as well as the Sigil WAD that you have to put into GZ Doom. There's a lot of ways you can make it work, but that's kind of the standard way of doing it. It comes with that. It also comes with a making of movie special on there. It comes with MP3s of the soundtrack as well. There's also CDs on there, and so you can watch the making special that breaks all of this down, and John Romero's talking through quite a bit of it. There's also a booklet included with the CDs that also has the soundtrack. And that booklet, or the soundtracks, I should say, and the booklet has, talks a lot about the making of process for Sigil as well. It's a beautiful collection. It has I think a pewter coin that it comes with, very, very heavy, very nice. That has kind of the Baphomet symbol on it with the 3 6s and all this. Then it also comes with John Romero. It comes with a pewter little statue with John Romero's head on a lance and or on a pike. And I thought that was really. I leave it in the box. I'm looking up here in the studio. I'm looking up at the box, and there it is, and it's beautiful. Because the box, the artwork on it is fucking stunning. It has, the upside down, it has the pentacle on it and kind of the Baphomet head and all this, and it just looks, it looks properly evil, as you'd expect from Doom and John Romero, quite frankly, which I'm a fan of all of it. It also comes with a t-shirt. Here's the thing in the box set that kind of pissed me off. I thought that, part of the reason that I got the box, really, I'll admit, was because I figured, look, let's be honest, it's 2019, it's the 21st century, okay? Of course, I would be able to just, torrent or something, and download Buckethead's soundtrack for this, because, there was enough press around it, you knew people were paying attention, it was going to happen. Everything in this box set, I could basically get in one form or another, for free online. The things that you couldn't get for free, and the one that I wanted particularly was, it was coming with a t-shirt that has, and it's a great actually, ironically, I didn't plan on this, but I'm wearing the t-shirt right now. It came with a t-shirt that has that Baphomet symbol and the pentagram and everything on it, and, it's a great t-shirt, and it's really cool. Well, once the game came out, suddenly they said, if you go to the link in the show notes, it basically said, for $25 or whatever, you can get a t-shirt as well at Romero Games. And I was like, if you're going to make shit limited edition, fucking make it limited edition. And I was a little annoyed because I thought that was the only way I was going to get the t-shirt. And that's part of the reason that I bought the box set. It's a big part of the reason that I ended up doing so. So I was a little ticked because as much as I love the big box, I don't really need the coin. I don't need John Romero's head on a pewter pike. I don't really need the CDs. I don't need all that. In fact, I don't consider myself a minimalist, but I like to keep my stuff, for lack of a better phrase, fairly minimalist. And, this huge box, as gorgeous as it is, if I could have just gotten the t-shirt and maybe bought the game with the soundtrack, that would have been enough for me. I would have been okay with that. So little annoyed by that, but whatever. I mean, the box set is, I think it was $50-$60 something I spent on it, and this was back in 2018 when I pre-ordered it. Is it worth it? Oh, absolutely. You're definitely getting your money's worth there, no doubt. In fact, another cool thing that you can do is, like I put, since the Sigil diskette, which is really just a USB drive, since that's writable, you can write to it and store stuff on it. I put all of my WADs. I love saying that. I put all of my WADs, baby. All my Doom WADs, which you need to be able to play Sigil. And I put, I put like all the files and the exes and everything. I put it all right on there. That way I have a copy of those in one central location. Granted, I could just download them from GOG, it's no problem, but it's kind of fun to have all of that and have like my ZDL scripts and everything else, right on one floppy drive. On a USB drive that looks like a floppy disk that says Sigil on it. So it's cool. I mean, I'm not really complaining, but I just kind of wish like that they kept a lot. I mean, because now I'm half expecting that they're going to sell everything else that's in the box set too. You just don't end up getting the box when I don't really care about the box, as gorgeous as it is. But, I got it for some of what it contains. And, well, anyway. But the game itself is brilliant. Not the hardest thing in the world. It's really hard. If you turn up the difficulty levels, then it's when you realize that the level design is really meant to challenge you when you get into the harder settings, okay, of Doom. And so, but if you don't do the harder settings, it feels fairly easy, even though there's some very novel, like one thing that I didn't realize at first. So there's like these little eye symbols, and they look like things that you can just like power-ups that you can collect, like armor and ammo and all this. But you actually have to shoot them to make like a bridge come up and all this. It's like this eye in a triangle and all that. And I didn't realize that at first, and I was like, oh, well, okay, that's interesting. And, they'll disappear once you, hit them with a bullet or something, and then you can, go up the bridge and all this. And, anyway, I had tons of fun playing it. I'm still having tons of fun playing it, and the deathmatch is fantastic. So do check out Sigil. As far as I know, maybe somebody's selling them on eBay. You really can't get the Beast box or the standard box set anymore. But I'm still, even with my complaint about the t-shirt thing, I'm very pleased to have it. It looks great. I do love looking up and just seeing Baphomet there. Like I'm totally on board with that. So yeah. So all right. Anyway, now why don't we go ahead now that we got that out of the way? Because I mentioned that I would give a little bit of a review once I got it in my hands. Let's talk about, what I consider to be the crown jewel, what I've been waiting for ever since it was initially announced that there was going to be a full-size version of this. Let's talk about the C64 that is being come out. And I'm actually going to read, I kind of wish that they would post this more on Twitter, because I hate having to even click on a Facebook link, but whatever, it's there. So they put their big announcements on Facebook, the company behind the C64, which is Retro Games Limited. So I'm going to read it here for you though. Finally, the news you've all been waiting for: the world's best-selling home computer reborn. Full-size version of the 80s best-selling home computer available on December 5th, 2019 in retail. A timeless classic is being given a new lease of life with the launch of a full-size version of the C64. Developed by Retro Games Limited and distributed by Koch Media, or Koch Media, Koch. The C64 is a fully licensed reimagining of the 80s best-selling home computer. Following its launch in anyway, it gives a big breakdown of that, but let's get into the specs here. The full-sized The C64 has a full working keyboard, comes with an updated, so of course Stanley breaking, and that's kind of the big difference between this and the C64 Mini. In fact, I remember a lot of people were kind of complaining, wishing that the C64 Mini, it would have been cute even if the keys just moved, not whether or not they would actually be practical. I mean, the C64 Mini is so small. No, it doesn't make any sense that those keys work. I didn't mind that the keys didn't work. I didn't really care. There is a feature here, though, that is something I said they better do, and they did do it. So, but we'll get to that. But anyway, you are getting a full-size keyboard, a full-size functioning keyboard on the full-size The C64. Very excited about that, okay? So, Commodore 64 coming back in grand fashion, right? 37 years later, and I would dare say it is. In fact, something that I totally forgotten about until I saw, there's a link in the show notes where you can watch the YouTube reveal trailer for the C64, the full-size one. Something I completely forgot about, because like I said, the Commodore 64 was my computer when I was a kid. Like, that was my baby. in a very real way. And I had forgotten, because one of the things I used to do a lot on it was like drawing and everything. I had forgotten that on the keys, on the keyboard, there were a lot of weird function keys, like on each one that sit along, if you're facing the keyboard. Again, these keys come up. It's not like a, little switch keyboard like on a laptop. On the face of the, where it says like, AWS, D, whatever, you look at the D looking down, but then if you look at the bottom, or, at the part of the key that's facing you, which is blank on most keyboards, on a Commodore 64, there were actually kind of function keys there where you could even create shapes and colors and do all this other weird shit. Is really, really cool. And even that is here. So incredible attention to detail and a nice inclusion. Anyway, let me read on. So yeah, you have a full working keyboard on this. The full size, I'll start reading again. The full size, the C64 has a full working keyboard, comes with an updated micro switch classic joystick. I'm going to stop on that. That is a winner, because that was one of the big complaints most people had, and I had it as well. In fact, I actually complained about it because I went out sight unseen and bought an extra the C64 Mini joystick, official one, like out of Germany. But those joysticks are frankly horrible. I love the C64 Mini. It's my top retro console right now. But that was disappointing though. So what I ended up doing was I got adapters and I used PlayStation 2 controllers with it, right? So that's an improvement. If it's micro switch, I'm going to guess it has a much more tactile feel. It's going to feel right. Improving the joystick, that was definitely, because that was a complaint pretty much across the board with people as far as the controller goes. Again, that's why I use a PlayStation 2. Now, with a full-size C64, am I still going to end up using the, a PlayStation 2 controller? Yeah, probably. But anyway, but the nice thing is that, and this was the main thing, and it was fine with the C64 Mini, you had two USB ports, right? Now you can easily, and it recognized, you could easily add on a USB hub, right? Where you could add on a bunch of ports, okay? But this was a pain because, you didn't have a working keyboard on it. That's already kind of solved with the full-size C64. But you didn't have a working keyboard on it, so you had to plug in a keyboard to do a lot. Granted, they would put an on-screen keyboard and all this on it. But, if you wanted to do two-player on some of these phenomenal games, some of the greatest games of all time, you're kind of screwed if you needed the keyboard in as well, and if you wanted to get saucy with with the C64's terminal, well, you started running into problems very quickly. Well, the full-sized C64 is going to come with 4 USB ports, and I said that a long time ago. I said it's a no-brainer. As soon as they announced this, I said it's a no-brainer to put more USB ports on this thing, and they did. So kudos to them. Reading on with their thing, it says you can plug it into one of the 4 USB ports, and it connects to any modern TV via HDMI. Brilliant. It features 3 switchable modes: boot straight into original C64 Basic, VIC-20 Basic, or switch to the Games Carousel and play one of the 64 built-in games in 50Hz or 60Hz with optional CRT filters / screen modes. As well as the classic C64 and VIC-20 Basic modes, the pre-installed games include such classics as California Games, Paradroid, and Boulder Dash, with new additions like Attack of the Mutant Camels, Hover Bover, Iridus Alpha, and Grid Runner, topped off with the recently released shoot 'em up Galencia, which, for folks that don't know, Stanley breaking in here, Galencia actually got released in a firmware update for the C64 Mini, which put it up to 65 games. Anyway, continuing, and Text Adventure Planet of Death to let you relive the glory days of true keyboard gaming. You can even load and save your own C64 and VIC-20 games via USB flash drive, as well as access multi-disc titles. So Stanley breaking in again. That's that's the same thing you could do with the C64 Mini, and that ability improved over time, where it used to be you could only put one game at a time and you had to rename the file and everything onto a USB drive and put that in. That was the other problem too, right? If you only had 2 USB ports and you wanted to load Sam's Journey, or one of the new a new C64 game, which there are plenty of, that could have been a bit of a pain in the ass. But that's not so anymore with 4 USB ports. That's the right move. The game selection, I'm sure, is going to be phenomenal. And again, the C64 software itself, as in like the C64 Mini and this C64, is frankly like just the best emulation software out there for Commodore 64 games, in my opinion, bar none. So to be able to, even if you just want to load, the various, ROM files basically onto it, I mean, this is just the best way that you can play them. And that's been my biggest argument for having the C64 Mini anyway, is because it does better emulation than any emulator on any computer that you could throw at it today. So this is all win. It's just total fucking win. Quote, here's just reading a little bit more of the release information. Quote, "We are delighted to be working with Koch Media once more, or Koch Media, to bring back even more of the most loved retro games ever on two of the most iconic home computers of all time, and which now has a full working keyboard," end quote, said Paul Andrews, Retro Games Managing Director. Quote, "The C64 full size is a reimagining of the classic C64 computer and the second in a planned series of products on the way," end quote. Now, I don't know what the fuck the second planned device is, but that's exciting. That's a nice little drop. Anyway, this thing's going to end up running about $120, okay, in the Americas when it ends up coming out. It is coming out on December 5th. I might try and get somebody from Retro Games Limited, get them on the Gaming Grid or even on Sovereign Tech and get them interviewed, because I think that this is just this is tremendous, and I. All the right stuff that I was expecting. There's even sites, I think, like at the German Amazon site, you can already pre-order this thing, which is, really, I mean, hey, great. Again, we know the dates. Now, I don't know if that was a U.S. date as well. I don't have a lot of clarity on that, but very excited for this. This is going to be one of the biggest, for me, probably the most exciting release this year as far as like all of the retro consoles go. And we do have other ones coming. Top contenders too. Again, Capcom's arcade console, that's going to be really slick. The TurboGrafx 16, which we're going to talk about a little bit later, I think that's a very exciting release. And of course, Sega's Genesis Mini has turned out to be a shockingly great collection, in my opinion, with some rarities, some new stuff that makes it very worthwhile to get your hands on. So, for retro gamers, the subculture of retro gamers and gamers in general, I would say, but at the very least, retro gamers, 2019 is a fucking awesome year for you, baby. Now, 2020 is not going to be a bad year either, because we're going to get, I think we have the official release date for this too. It's going to be October 10th, 2020. So, a little over a year away, but the Intellivision Amico, which had a very strong showing at E3 in 2019, is finally going to get released. And we saw mock-ups of the final version of the Intellivision Amico. Now, it doesn't look much like the original Intellivision, but it is a gorgeous device. I mean, it looks very, very futuristic, and something to understand with the Intellivision Amico. Now, we haven't talked about this much on the Gaming Grid, even though I've felt for a while that this is one of the so the Atari VCS actually ended up going up for pre-order, like on Walmart.com and all these other places. So it looks like that might actually finally come to fruition. Whether or not it's a product of note is, I think, still very much in the air. And in fact, I don't know. I still, even though it takes a lot for you to get a listing on Walmart.com, maybe it doesn't take as much as I think, but I can imagine it takes something. I'm still a little skeptical about this, but well, anyway, this is unlike all of the other products that have been, and how many other ones were there? There was a Coleco, the newer, the Coleco Chameleon, was it? Whatever, that ended up not becoming a thing. The Intellivision Amico, in my opinion, is the real deal. In fact, they just today, as I'm recording this, I think they announced they opened up an office in Dubai. Intellivision Entertainment, that being the company that's coming out with this. I mean, these people are fucking serious. They're ready to go. And They said it would take a couple of years. They wanted to do it right. And what we saw at E3, there was playable demos. They have 22 games ready to rock and roll. It looks like they are as serious as they claim they were. Now, I have from VentureBeat, there's an interview done with Tommy Tallarico, who is kind of the head guy behind Intellivision Entertainment. And he had an interesting statement to make that I think is worthwhile to bring up. I'm going to read it here from VentureBeat. Quote, "The big thing we want to talk about," and this is at E3, "and make people understand is that this is not a retro console. The Intellivision might be a retro name, but the Intellivision Amico is a brand new standalone console. We have a four-pronged approach to software, which we're showing today. It's 25% retro, yes, reimagined classic, but that's only 25% of what we're doing. 25% is original IP. 25% is sports and recreation, not only baseball, soccer, and football, but also fun family sports like bowling, darts, pool, shuffleboard. All the amazing things where we can use the gyroscope and accelerometer. We're kind of picking up where the Wii left off 13 years ago, as you heard me say. The last 25% is puzzle games, board games, game shows, educational, and that kind of stuff as well. Everything is always based around getting to the core roots of gaming, getting people on a couch together, couch co-op. Every game is a single-player mode, but a must in every single one of our 10 commandments of game design. Every game must have couch co-op and multiplayer. We're not doing multiplayer online. Woo! Stallion breaking in. Fuck yes! Speaking my language there, Tommy. Damn. I've said that all the time. I love multiplayer when it's this, and I like the term couch co-op, where people have to sit next to you and you're going to have to go and kick ass in these games together, right there, face to face. I love that. So kudos to Intellivision for talking that language. Anyway, he goes on and he says, it's just people in a room together, all playing together. Even some of the stuff like bleep, for example, which I don't know what they bleeped out. But anyway, I love it. I love it. I love it. That's the right attitude. And that's the thing. This thing does have like two controllers that kind of look like iPod Classics. And they have, you know, they're going to simulate to some degree what the Wiimote could do with the Nintendo Wii. So it's an interesting direction that they're going with gaming. And I don't think the Wii style of gaming was done. So for the Amico to want to capitalize on that, winning combination, in my opinion. Getting people sitting in front of, sitting on the couch, getting together in meat space, you are speaking my language, baby. It's still, I know he doesn't want to call it a retro console. It's a new console. But at the end of the day, it's that retro gaming ethos that it certainly has. So if I still call it a retro console, I mean it as no offense. I mean it is that it has the mentality, the gaming philosophy that I love as primarily a retro gamer. Okay, and as the Gaming Grid as a show, as a podcast, likes to concentrate really hard on that retro gaming ethos, at least, even if it's on more modern hardware. Games were played. The things I heard from a few people boots on the ground, they were very impressed with what they saw. So this is something that is coming as well, and we're definitely going to be keeping an eye on. And do I want to get my hands on one? Oh, with the way that Tommy Tellerico's talking, you bet your ass. In fact, he's welcome to come on the show, and we'll do an interview and talk up the Amico all he wants. I'm very excited about this. Now, while we're talking about retro gaming at E3, why don't we continue towing the line here with the announcement of, now in America, it depends where you are, and this is true for a lot of them, right? Like the Sega Genesis Mini in Japan and Europe, it's called the Sega Mega Drive Mini, right? The Konami announced, and this was really out of nowhere. I don't think anybody was expecting this to be a thing. I never heard any rumblings of it. I mean, I knew a lot of people that wouldn't have minded one. And in fact, I even said it on the Gaming Grid and on Sovereign Tech. I said, yeah, I'll take a TurboGrafx 16, Bonk's Adventure, let's rock and roll, let's do this thing. And but it did. Konami came out of nowhere and said, oh yeah, we're doing the TurboGrafx 16 Mini. Now, of course, if you're in Japan, it's the PC Engine Mini, and called other things in other territories. Now, the TurboGrafx 16, not the most well-known, certainly in America. I mean, in Japan, very different story. PC Engine, was part of what, and its encroachment upon sales, including the Genesis at the time, or the Mega Drive over there, was one of the things that inspired Nintendo. In fact, we talked about this in a recent Gaming Grid. Inspired Nintendo to make the Super Nintendo. Otherwise, Nintendo would have just been happy with, oh yeah, we'll make NES games till the end of time. Which, honestly, I wouldn't have minded that either, as much as I love the Super Nintendo. But regardless of that, anyway, that originally in Japan came out in '87. Not the biggest deal in America, but it did do some numbers. People do remember it to some degree. In fact, the first time I ever played R-Type was on the TurboGrafx 16 when I was a kid. Of course, that was in the in the '90s. There's a couple of unique things about the release of the TurboGrafx 16 Mini. Now, Konami did do a poll of what games you'd like to see end up getting released for the TurboGrafx 16 Mini, and that poll is pretty much totally topped off by Snatcher, which Snatcher is a game. I think that did that get a Sega CD release? Anyway, Hideo Kojima, of course, who's best known for Metal Gear, the Metal Gear series, he released Snatcher in 1988. It's a cyberpunk game, really, really badass game that emulation is fortunately allowed for a lot of the rest of the world to be able to play. Be it for whatever reasons, be it because of geography or just when you were born. I hope that that's on here. We do have, there was, again, they did do a poll, and there's a top 20 games that end up going to get released for this, but already we know that the aforementioned, as I mentioned, R-Type is going to be on there. I'll take a shmup any day. New Adventure Island's going to be there. Wise Book 1 and 2, Ninja Spirit, Dungeon Explorer, Alien Crush, and there's going to be, I don't know if they said exactly how many games they plan on releasing or are going to be on this. Maybe that's to be decided. I mean, frankly, the Sega Genesis Mini, yeah, it was supposed to be like 40 or 42 games, and now we know technically it's well beyond that. Because Sega just kind of changed their mind. I think initially they said 40, then we're like, oh, guess what? We're actually going to do 42. But then based upon what games are on there, like, Mega Man The Wily Wars, you actually have like 45, 46, 47 games. That might shift a little bit. So they're going to have the usual, the TurboGrafx 16 Mini is going to have the usual stuff where you don't have to, deal with save games the way that you used to, where you had to get to a save point and stuff like that. I mean, because it's basically emulation. You can save your game at any point. I mean, that's just an obvious thing to put on this. You're going to have the different display modes, right, where you can make it simulate a CRT, might do widescreen and, or 4:3. Now, the more unique thing that the TurboGrafx 16 is going to allow for is simultaneous 5-player gaming with a multi-tap, which I'll hear right from their website, from Konami's TurboGrafx 16 Mini website. By using a multi-tap to connect additional controllers, up to 5 people can play together simultaneously. Multi-tap sold separately. Now, that part right there excites me. Why? Because this is what I was talking about with the Sega Genesis Mini. And we know in Japan, with the Mega Drive, there are going to be these things. Like with the Mega Drive Mini, and hopefully it'll come to America as well. But with the Mega Drive Mini, you can buy a accessory that turns the Sega Mega Drive Mini into the Tower of Power, where it has the Mega Drive CD, it has the 32X and all that. Even though they're just for show, they don't really do anything. It's just for look. But it's a great look. And the idea of selling a lot more accessories around retro consoles, I love that, because make it an event, make it a thing that you can get really into. Sell the t-shirts, whatever. In fact, actually, ThinkGeek, I think, sold t-shirts for when the SNES Mini came out, or the SNES Classic, depending what part of the world you're in. And like I have a Star Fox 2 t-shirt, which Star Fox 2 technically only came out with, the SNES Classic. So yeah, I love this, that there's some kind of accessory line to come out around this. But in this case, we actually have and I know the Neo Geo Mini, which I have, and I'm a fan, like where they sold like different stickers that you could put on the arcade cabinet of the Neo Geo Mini, and like screen protectors. I mean, that's one thing. Or you can buy cases for it, that fit it. I have those. That's one thing. But like to actually sell like functional accessories, now that's a whole other ballpark, and I think that's fucking awesome. So for the TurboGrafx 16 to have that with the multi-tap, even just that, I think is really cool, and I'm curious what the numbers are going to look like for that. How many people buy into the accessories around these things? I'll buy a multi-tap with it, absolutely. I hope they sell a whole package. Because do I want this? Oh yeah. No, I totally want this, because, I mean, granted, like the Wii, the Nintendo Wii, not the Wii U, the original Wii, had the retro consoles where you could play Commodore 64 games on it. You could play certain ones, whatever got released in the Wii store, or you can, you could buy, or you could play TurboGrafx 16 games on there as well. I mean, that was great. There's a reason the Wii is one of the greatest consoles ever. While the 3DS, which I love the 3DS, and some other systems have made it possible to very easily play games from these rarer systems, at least for people in America that are rarer. The TurboGrafx 16 is one where it's not so simple, and there's not so much of a scene around it. So to be able to jump on it in a retro console mini format, yeah, I think this is an insta-buy. I am totally on top of this. So very exciting release, and just the fact, I mean, the games that they already announced are great. I hope, I'll give you the list of 20 here. There's a link in the show notes for this as well, that were voted on, but a lot of them were Japanese only releases. I don't mind if they come over here and they're ported and translate. That's fine with me too. Okay, but so let's see what we got here. There's Snatcher, of course, which you mentioned. Magical Chase, which is a shooter. Emerald Dragon, an RPG. Linda Cubed. It's Linda 3, but it looks like Linda Cubed. That's an RPG. JJ and Jeff. Tokameki Memorial. Spriggan Mark II. Valkyrie no Denetsu. Tengai Makyu. Tengai Makyu Ziria. Wise 4. Yeah, I think that should be on there if you're going to put 1 and 2 on there. Cho Aniki. Anyway, a lot of them are Japanese games. Lords of Thunder and Soldier Blade, those are good choices too that are on there. But you can look at the full list, but that's just an idea of what's been voted. That doesn't mean they're going to end up being on there. Again, we only know 4 games that are going to be on there. But I say load this baby up, Konami. Go nuts and put as many games as you want on this thing. No limit, and I think it'll end up being worth the price, and I'll definitely jump on top of that multi-tap. I think that's really, really cool. So that was a big surprise for me coming out of E3, and I think a surprise for everyone. Definitely, I think it, minus Nintendo, it stole the show at E3 with the TurboGrafx 16 Mini, because I don't think anybody saw it coming. Now, Nintendo's showing at E3 was nothing to sneeze at. And I'm not even going to bother talking about Sony or Microsoft, what they were talking about there. Plenty of podcasts, I'm sure, concentrating on that. But I'm not going to talk about it, partly because I think Nintendo really, in fact, it's funny, they only went for like 45 minutes, as to where Sony and Microsoft, I think they went like an hour and change, maybe even 2 hours. Nintendo did a 45-minute, basically a Nintendo Direct, but their presentation only went that long, and they just, standing ovation, they just slammed everybody down, doing it in half the time. It was really, really impressive. Of course, there was the talk about the Animal Crossing New Horizons getting delayed until 2020. That was kind of a disappointment for a lot of people. However, what I think shocked everybody was basically at the end, and this is really the thing worthwhile talking about, is because we didn't get any hardware announcements at E3, which we knew. Nintendo said they weren't going to do any at E3. I'm still expecting they might have something new to talk about here. But there is going to be a sequel to The Legend of Zelda Breath of the Wild. I mean, do you want to talk about standing O? There was a standing O. In fact, I'm sure there's all kinds of other O's there when people heard that announcement. I mean, fucking insane. The footage that they showed for Luigi's Mansion 3 was wild. I mean, there's so many games coming out. The Panzer Dragoon remake, a lot of great shit coming out for the Nintendo Switch. No 3DS games announced, or 3DS is not talked about there. After the fact, there was, what's his name, Bowser there, who is the, yes, that's his name, Bowser, who's the head of Nintendo of America. He said in other interviews that basically this show wasn't about the 3DS, so they didn't talk about it. Now you got everybody saying, oh, the 3DS is dead, blah, blah, blah. I don't give a shit, because Limited Run Games also announced that actually they are planning on physical releases for the 3DS. So we're going to get new games still for the 3DS. Regardless of that, yeah, I mean, do I because I love the 3DS. I love the 3DS more than I love the Switch, not knocking the Switch at all. Do I wish that they announced some games for the 3DS? Sure. But all of the announcements that Nintendo made, and, they were showing more from the remake of Legend of Zelda Link's Awakening. I mean, that was all dynamite stuff. And they had to put on like a really strong showing and just make, Microsoft and Sony look as bad as they possibly could. And I think Nintendo achieved that. And I thought that their announcements, I mean, total winners there. There was a lot of press about E3 coming out after E3. I don't really have a whole lot to say other than that Nintendo totally stole that show, and I gave you the bulk of the reasons why. In fact, even there's going to be a new Contra game. Was it Rogue Core? I'm game for that. No pun intended. But a lot of people were talking about how violent, as in the violent content of the games, the main games talked about at E3. There's a lot of talk about that this year. I can see where people are coming from. Tommy Tallarico of Intellivision, he came out and said, oh, we're not doing that. The Amico is not about that, blah, blah, blah. I'm glad somebody wants to take on that niche. I don't know. I mean, we're also talking about the system that's going to have the new Earthworm Jim on it, right? Which is what, the Intellivision Amico is. It's going to be somewhat of an exclusive or a total exclusive. I don't know. I mean, a lot of people say that this and this game are going to be exclusives, and then we find out that no, actually, the new Tomb Raider game is going to get released on everything, right? Which that I think was that announced. What was the Tomb Raider announcement that ended up happening during the Nintendo? Was it Tomb Raider Trilogy that they ended up announcing? Anyway, regardless, that's besides the point. So, yeah, and I appreciate that Intellivision is saying we're going to be the non-violent console and all this, and I think there's really a place for that. Like I'm totally on board with that. Actually, I think the Tomb Raider announcement was for the which we're going to get to, the Google Stadia. We got it. We got to talk about that. But anyway, yeah, I get it. I understand. And this is where I think that gaming is such a big thing now. We've been saying this has been a theme on actually Zomia 1 Underground Q&As. It's been a theme on the Gaming Grid, and even I've talked about it a bit on Sovereign Tech, where gaming is such a big market now. Gaming itself is not niche, but within gaming, there are going to be a lot of niches. And I don't mean some people like RPGs more than they like FTSs, or I mean RTSs, or first-person shooters or whatever, FPSs. I don't mean that. I mean there are niches as into like gaming philosophy, okay, as in non-violent games, retro games, etc. Cloud-based games, whatever. This is the point that we've gotten to, and that's okay for there to be that, shall we say, fragmentation. And if there's whole consoles that service certain niches, that's okay too, and I fully support it and think it's a beautiful thing. So just mentioning that, I get that the tone was that way, but with the prevalence of retro consoles, I think we're heading into new territory as far as gaming goes. Now, that's our E3 wrap up. There's plenty of other stuff to talk about, but I'm sure there's plenty of gaming shows that would much rather talk about all the newest hotness and Call of Duty horseshit, which I have no interest in. So let's talk about the, pun intended, the game changer, that being Google Stadia. We do know it's going to end up getting released in November of this year, okay, in November 2019. You can buy what's called the Founders Edition, okay, of the Stadia, and it's not a console. Basically, you're going to get a Founders Edition with like a blue paint job. I think it is like midnight blue or something, paint job of the controller for Google Stadia, right? And which we've talked about Stadia in the previous Gaming Grid, a lot of the technicals. If you want to hear about all that, go listen to that. This is all about how you can get your hands on it, what's coming. So you'll get that, and then you'll get a Chromecast Ultra. This is for $130, okay, that you get access to this. And you get so many months of the premium subscription for Google Stadia, because there will be a free tier. The free tier I don't think will start until 2020, where there are certain games that you'll be able to play on the free tier, and there'll be certain giveaways. But basically, you're going to have to buy the games that you'll largely, I mean, you can pay, there's a pay-for version for Stadia that'll get you access to games, but if you're on the free tier, you have to buy games just like you would on a console. That's not really a bad thing. That's not a bad model, and we'll get into the gaming list as well here. But Stadia Pro, which is the premium subscription, that's going to be $10 a month. I don't think it feels steep at first, and basically you're going to spend, after you've already bought, it's a question of, you probably want to get the controller, but you don't need it. Because basically anybody that has a screen in front of them attached to some kind of computing device, smartphone, Chromebook, Windows computer, Mac, whatever, already has Google Stadia, basically. You don't have to buy anything else. And if you already have a controller, it can probably work with Google Stadia. You can buy the specific Stadia controller that works with things like Chromecasts and other stuff, sure. Okay, and there's something to be said for doing that, because again, the controller automatically connects or has its own Wi-Fi connection and connects directly to the Stadia servers. That's what helps, solve that lag. Now, there are people who tested it out, Ars Technica and others, who said that they didn't really notice the lag, and yeah, this thing's able to do like 4K, and in the future, it's probably going to be able to do 8K. I mean, it's real. The specs on this are really insane. Now, for $120 a year for the Stadia Pro subscription, okay, over the 5 years, you have effectively paid, somewhere over $600 for this console. Is that worth it? Well, I think they would have had a no-brainer if it was more like $5 a month. Frankly, every 5 years, we're kind of 5 or 6 years, or maybe, 8, depending on how you want to think about it, we're conditioned to buy a new console generation anyway. So you're not really, here's the rub, you're not exactly getting a better deal, and the fact that you still have to buy games at points, you're not really getting a better deal, necessarily, than the consoles, but you are way ahead of what the consoles can do. You are getting newer generation hardware, and you're never worrying about whether or not you can play said and such game, like, I don't know, whenever it comes out, Mortal Kombat 15 or something. You're never going to worry about that because it's all being handled by Google's servers. Okay? I still think it's actually, for what it is, if you're interested in this sort of thing, I think it's a worthwhile purchase. Let's talk about the game list here. Anyway, let me read a little bit from, this is actually, and this link you might want to keep because Android Police is going to keep updating this with the latest games and latest news that's coming out. But so here we go. Google's cloud gaming service Stadia begins trialing in November. You'll need to buy a $130 Foundation or Founders Edition kit to get access, and is expected to expand to the general audience sometime in 2020. So far, 30 games have been announced for the early roster, and we expect more of them to pop up as we go along this year. It'd be a little hard to keep track of things, so we've got you covered. Anyway, this is the link where you want to keep track of all that. Much like any other console or platform, Google requires players on its free tier, which is called Stadia Base instead of Stadia Pro, to buy all of their games. At $10 per month, Stadia Pro grants subscribers access to the occasional free game, as well as discounts to many other titles, so keep that in mind. You may also expect publisher subscriptions like Ubisoft's Uplay Plus to work with Stadia after its official launch. Anyway, we'll be, they say they'll be updating the games, but here's the list of games that you're going to get. So you still got to buy these games. And, for some people that might not make sense, but I don't know. There's a part of me that thinks, well, if I can get away with buying a much lower end computer, but pay for Stadia Pro and get, or even the free tier, and get access to varying games like, say, the latest Mortal Kombat, I gotta admit, it's very attractive. So, Dragon Ball Xenoverse 2, okay, that, of course, that's an older game. Some of these are older games, some of these are the latest. Doom Eternal, which is going to be coming out, that's probably going to be a major launch game for Google Stadia. That's intriguing, to be able to rock that. Wolfenstein Youngblood, which that's coming up too. Destiny 2, Power Rangers Battle for the Grid, Baldur's Gate 3, The Black Hound. I'm pretty excited for that whenever that ends up coming out. Metro Exodus, Thumper, Grid, the new Samurai Showdown, which I think actually just comes out today. Then there's Football Manager 2020, Get Packed, Elder Scrolls Online, The Crew 2, The Division 2, Assassin's Creed Odyssey. Not a surprise, that was a test game for Google's gaming cloud gaming platforms anyway. Ghost Recon Breakpoint, Trials Rising, NBA 2K, Borderlands 3, Farming Simulator 19, Mortal Kombat 11. Now, I'm a huge Mortal Kombat fan. That's not a surprise to anybody in the gaming grid, because I do tournaments for that, and do very well, thank you. But that got me a little excited when I was like, the fact that, like, I could play the latest Mortal Kombat game and not worry about, upgrading my PC, or not worry about, getting a new console and all that, that was a little attractive, with Google Stadia. But reading on, Rage 2, Final Fantasy 15, Jilt, I think it's called, Tomb Raider Trilogy. Of course, that's a classic game. Darksiders Genesis, Just Dance 2020, Watch Dogs Legion, and Marvel's Avengers. So, it's a pretty good list for starters, and there's going to be a ton more come that time, but they need to have names out there. And I think having Doom Eternal, the new Wolfenstein, and Mortal Kombat 11 were kind of and Baldur's Gate 3 were kind of the big ones to get people interested. So this is happening. And again, I get it. There's an argument to be made that, over 10 years, you're going to spend $1,000 basically for this console. But really consider that most people that buy an Xbox One or a PS4 or PS5, they're already paying for PlayStation Network or Xbox Live Gold or whatever. And that's a tacked on price and granted, I know with like Xbox Live Gold, you get, or with Xbox Live, you get free games and all this, games with gold, right? That's a tacked on price already to the hundreds of dollars that the console costs. So, I don't know. I think the pricing isn't too crazy for Google Stadia. And I think this is going to end up, this could be the console killer. It's not going to kill PC gaming. It's not going to kill, I don't think it's going to kill like the Oculus Quest. I don't think it's going to kill the Nintendo Switch because it's Nintendo, and Nintendo is just, they're their own animal, okay? They exist in their own little ecosystem. They're kind of like Apple. Yeah, everything else happens in computing, but Apple trudges on. Nintendo does Apple better than Apple does, in my opinion. And I've said that for a long time on Sovereign Tech. I don't see them doing that, but as far as like Microsoft and Sony, oh yeah, I think this is going to kill both of those. It's going to wipe them out. In my opinion, I think that's what's going to end up happening. This is how you get, I haven't heard anybody use this term, but this is how you get post-console, because this really isn't, it is a console, but it's not. It's a Chromecast. It's whatever screen you have in front of you. So this is very, very, very interesting. It was it wasn't like the biggest, presentation. Like the presentation wasn't like, ooh, ah. But what I think they laid down, I think it makes sense, and I think this is going to, pun intended, change the game. So Google Stadia, exciting stuff, lots of exciting things going on in the gaming world right now. So much and there was a lot more to talk about that happened throughout June. We'll end up saving that for July, which is coming up fast in 2019. So a new gaming grid to come up for you soon. But just to wrap this one up, the Intellivision Amico, the full-size, the C64 full-size, very excited for that, coming December 5th. We've got the TurboGrafx 16 Mini coming out. So much exciting shit coming out, especially even if you're just a retro gamer, to get your hands on. And boy, don't forget to try out Sigil. Just tons of great shit out there. Jump on it, folks. And I am going to sign off for this gaming grid. I'll see all of you on the other side.
Game over.